last time we noted how God's commitment to Israel, to communicating with them and through them to the other nations, didn't waver despite their repeated unfaithfulness. Eventually, after many warnings through his prophets, God judged the two kingdoms through military defeat and exile. After a generation, many Hebrews returned to Palestine. Their territory was occupied by others a number of times over the following centuries, culminating with the Romans around 60 BC. Around 340 years before the Romans, God equipped and sent one of his storytellers, his prophets, to the Jews. His name was Malachi, the last prophet recorded in the first of the two major divisions of God's Word, the Old Testament. Malachi reminds the Jewish people of God's promise, first given in the dark time of the fall, that he would send a deliverer. He says that this long-promised one will come soon. But just before he does, another prophet will come, bringing a message from God designed to prepare them for the arrival of the deliverer. After Malachi's death, God does not send another prophet for 400 years. It's as though God is silent, waiting to send the promised one. In fact, those 400 years are traditionally called the silent years for that reason. However, as we look back on this period of history, we're able to see how God is using events and individuals to prepare for what is coming. Through the process of Hellenization, the Greek language has become widely used through the entire region. Many people groups, formerly isolated, are now able to communicate with each other. Later, to further Rome's military ambitions and then serve the needs of the empire, a vast network of roads is built. Cities throughout the provinces are linked in ways that has never happened before. During this time, Hebrew people spread out and settle through much of the Mediterranean basin, bringing monotheism and a knowledge of God's word with them. Synagogues are built in far-flung communities, and for the first time, God's narrative with his promises about the deliverer becomes widely accessible. We pick up the narrative at a time when Palestine has been under Roman dominance for some decades. Among the Jews eagerly waiting for the arrival of the Messiah, God's specially chosen one, is an elderly, childless couple, Zechariah and Elizabeth. This is in Luke chapter 1, verses 5 to 7. One day, while Zechariah, a priest, is carrying out his duties in the temple, one of God's spirit messengers, an angel, appears in physical form. This is recorded in Luke chapter 5, verses 8 to 25. An angel tells Zechariah that although aged, he and Elizabeth are to have a son. They are to call him John. In Hebrew or Aramaic form, that means God has shown grace. As the angel goes on to describe John's role, it's clear that he is the prophet Malachi predicted would come immediately before the deliverer. His message would be designed to prepare people's hearts for the promised one. But most startling and exciting of all was the news that the deliverer would be the Lord himself. Somehow God would be coming among his people in a special way. What could this mean? So John is born to this couple in their old age. As we've noted before, God is not restricted by the laws of nature, which are, of course, his design anyway. A few days after the birth, God, the Spirit, gives Zechariah the special ability to speak for God, to prophesy. His prophecy is recorded in Luke chapter 1, verses 67 to 79, declaring that the promises passed on by God's prophets down through history about the Messiah are about to come true. And God is going to fulfill the promise he made to Abraham, the promise that through him, through his family line, all the families of the earth will be blessed. John, when he grows up, is to prepare the way by telling the people about their sins and how they can be saved from them. The one whose way John is to prepare will be the Lord himself. Zechariah says that because of God's mercy, the morning light of heaven is about to break upon them, and light will come to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death. That's in Luke chapter 1, verses 78 to 79. Since Adam and Eve willingly listened to the lies of Satan, in many ways darkness had ruled the earth and its human inhabitants. Of course, God's creation continued to speak day after day to tell his story, and he had revealed himself to human beings numerous times. He had made a covenant, he'd given his law, and he'd lived among his people, the Israelites. He'd sent his prophets, and their words had been recorded. But Satan had seen to it that people continued to be confused. And the people themselves, the narrative says, on the whole, prefer darkness because they feel it allows them to do what they want without accountability. So God is now coming into the darkness himself. And by doing so, he's going to bring light, truth, to expose things for what they really are, to reveal the lies, and above all, to demonstrate who he really is in a way that has never happened before. He's going to come and find those who will listen, those who through John's work, through his written word, through his Spirit, are ready to listen. And he's going to tell his story directly to them in an unprecedented way. This event, God coming into the world in this way, is going to be the most momentous event in all of history. It will prove to be the thing which ties together and makes sense of everything in God's narrative, the past, the present, and the future.